On the Mark Steyn Show, we cover the stories a lot of people are scared even to mention. The stuff that really matters with some of the world's biggest thinkers.
Now is his opportunity to kind of take the steering wheel of history.
Break away from the flop at 8 o'clock on GB News with the Mark Steyn Show.
We are GB News.
And we'd like to say thank you
to each and every one of you
for helping our great nation
find its voice.
We're absolutely everywhere.
Across England, Scotland, Wales and Northern Ireland.
On TV,
on radio and online.
We're proud to be
the People's Channel, Britain's
news channel.
Good morning, you're watching and listening to GB News. This is Saturday morning with Esther and Philip.
And we've got lots coming up for you today. We'll be discussing grooming gangs, poppy wearing, and we'll be asking whether the UK is a racist country following comments from an American talk show host. And we'll also be joined by Peter Tatchell to discuss his one-man protest in Qatar.
As ever, we want to hear from you today, so if you want to get involved in the conversation, email us gbviews@gbnews.uk or tweet us at gbnews. But first, it's the time for the headlines with Alice.
Good morning. It's 10 o'clock. I'm Alice Porter in the GB newsroom. A whistleblower at an asylum processing centre in Kent has told GB News the government is not acknowledging the true extent of the crisis there. The worker at the Manston military base claims violence, disease and attempts of self-harm are a daily occurrence at the facility. The processing centre is only supposed to hold asylum seekers for no more than 24 hours before transferring them to longer-term accommodation. But many have allegedly been there weeks in unsuitable living conditions. Former Chief Immigration Officer Kevin Saunders says the problem lies with the legislation.
80% of people coming across the channel are from Albania, and we do have legislation, of course, that we can remove them. However, and here's the problem, the people that advise these refugees are saying, just say to the UK authorities that you've been trafficked, because once you've said that, they can't remove you.
The head of the Royal Navy has ordered an investigation into what he's called abhorrent allegations of sexual assault and harassment in the submarine service. Admiral Sir Ben Key says the behaviour will not be tolerated, is totally unacceptable and not a true reflection of what service life should be. He says anyone who is found culpable will be held accountable regardless of their rank or status. The Foreign Secretary says countries must work together to fight online terror and cut terrorists' resources. Addressing a United Nations meeting in India, James Cleverly urged allied states to tackle terror groups' use of technology to recruit and radicalise people and live-stream attacks. He's expected to meet India's Minister of External Affairs to strengthen cooperation between the two countries. Russia has declared the end of its Ukraine mobilisation campaign. The Defence Minister told President Putin that the target of 300,000 people had been met and they will now stop deploying reservists to fight. The controversial move led to tens of thousands of Russian men fleeing the country. Ukraine's President Volodymyr Zelensky says he doubts Moscow is done with calling up soldiers.
We have reports the enemy has completed its mobilisation, as if there is no longer a need to send new waves of Russian citizens to the front. We feel very differently on the front lines. Russia are so poorly prepared and equipped, so brutally used by their command, that it allows us to presume that very soon Russia may need a new wave of people to send to the war.
The UK's former ambassador to Russia says diplomacy between the two sides is still happening behind the scenes.
You do need people to talk to one another. During the Cuban Missile Crisis, luckily, they found ways of what I call negotiating around the end of the table, getting through to the other side. And, you know, there have been conversations quite recently between senior Russians and senior Americans, and that's because actually both sides are frightened.
Development experts say the UK is now spending more of its foreign aid budget at home rather than in developing countries. Over £3 billion will be spent domestically this year, with the Centre for Global Development saying much of it is going towards housing refugees, mainly from Ukraine. Rishi Sunak was previously criticised as Chancellor for slashing the foreign development budget and stretching the rules on what counts as aid. A Foreign Office spokesperson says the UK remains one of the largest global aid donors. President Biden has labelled the attack on US House Speaker Nancy Pelosi's husband as despicable. Police say Paul Pelosi was violently assaulted with a hammer at their California home yesterday morning. He has since undergone surgery to repair a skull fracture and other serious injuries. The suspect in the attack is in custody and the motive for the attack is under investigation. Railway staff in Scotland are staging a 24-hour walkout amid ongoing disputes over pay. More than 2,000 members of the RMT union are striking, and passengers are being warned to expect widespread disruption. ScotRail say the latest pay offer would have seen the lowest paid staff receive a basic pay increase of almost 7.5%. But the RMT say the latest increase falls short because of the high levels of inflation. This is GB News. We'll bring you more news as it happens. Now it's back to Esther and Philip.
Thank you, Alice. Now, let's start the show today by looking at some of the biggest stories in the papers. And to do so, we're delighted to be joined in the studio by celebrity chef and friend of the show, Kevin Woodford. So what's been catching your eyes?
There's a story in the Express from yesterday that sort of didn't amuse me. It sort of it woke me up. It's to do with wokeism, I'm afraid. Apparently, what it appears was that there was a young German lady who was on a plane coming from Germany to England, and she has a job joining the NHS as a nurse. A chap sat next to her is chatting to her, and she's explaining that before she can actually start work, she has to attend 6 courses in the UK, right? These are instructional sort of courses. One was inclusivity and diversity. Health and safety, absolutely, fully in agreement with that one I am. Subconscious discrimination, deprivation in ethnic minority groups, ageism and sexism, okay, and gender identification. Now, I've got a feeling that this particular young lady landed in England and decided this is not for me. I've come here to become a nurse, and that's what I want to do, and got back on the plane. But this links in with a situation that I found. I was in the Isle of Man last week. Lovely, lovely, beautiful island, right? And allegedly there were, or are, 3 children in the Isle of Man that have identified as cats, okay? And they are allowed to sort of join the class and sit there as cats. I'd neuter them, quite frankly. That's what I would do. So in checking this out, the Department of Education, Sport and Culture on the island says there are no policies in place to support the wishes of children who want to be identified as something other than humans. I wonder where this goes to. I really do, for goodness sake.
Well, there's definitely, when you're taking it to levels like that, there's going to be a woke backlash, isn't there? There has already been a woke backlash. But if somebody was coming over to be a nurse, of which we need more nurses, but they're put off the job by all of the things they have to do, which they think is not part of my job. If you've got ridiculous situations there where you can't teach a child, if they think they're a cat, what do you teach them? To lick milk out of a saucer? I mean, what is it we're going to do? And I see, and in the Telegraph today, it was the most anti-woke police chief constable who is saying, and he's managed to turn around a police force already. He's now turned round Greater Manchester Police because he's anti-woke. He says we've got to get back to what we do as a job. And this was the man who said, you know, the only person I kneel to is either Queen, God or Mrs. Watson, who's his wife, and that's Stephen Watson. So this anti-woke kickback should ripple right the way through.
Can I just say on this NHS thing, we actually have a situation in the country where actually if doctors come from abroad, their credentials are not always checked before they start practising in the UK. It's sort of taken as read. If they say they're a doctor somewhere, they're not all checked. So we've got this ludicrous situation where you could have a doctor coming in who isn't properly checked for their credentials. but they'll have done all their courses on equality and diversity. And I mean, we've just gone completely.
I mean, I go back, honestly, Phil and Esther, I go back to many years ago when I was the head of a college in Sheffield. And we had the positive discrimination stuff, which was great, you know. But even with that, you still had the issues that, you know, you could lose some really good staff because you had to go down a particular route.
Next story there, Kevin.
Oh, you're coming straight to me.
Controversial.
I saw the Luke. I saw the Luke. That's the Luke of love.
I was about to...
Were you going to launch into your story?
Well, I was about to shock everybody, to be perfectly honest.
Well, I'm up for that. We've already been shocked.
Well, we've been shocked, I'm going to shock you even more. Quality Street could have 3 fewer sweets in them this Christmas.
Oh, this is
now, is that shocks you?
No, it doesn't.
Apparently, normally there were 62 in a tub. Oh no, there's usually 65, and it's going to be 62 this year. I bet it's still full of all those rubbish ones, though, isn't it? There's only about 3 or 4 that you like. All the rest are absolutely hopeless. This is the cost of living crisis, the Quality Street, but.
Was it cost of living or was it health? Was it less sugar because there was 3 less sweets?
It can't be health.
And does it shock everybody or was it just you that was shocked, Philip?
I was shocked. I won't be buying them this year. And but this one, I wanted your opinion on this, Kevin, because...
Can I just say quickly on that?
Yeah, go on.
That's not new, right? Because when I was a little boy...
There were 90. There were probably 90.
Oh, there were hundreds, I remember them. But there was a wagon wheel which was as big as your head.
Yes.
Wasn't it? Now the wagon wheel, what is it now? It's like a sixpence.
Yeah. Size isn't everything, though, Kevin. Anyway,
did you hear that, Esther?
I did, and I disagree, but go on.
Page 5 of the Star. Healthy recipes off the menu. I wanted your opinion on this, Kevin, because it says here, households are turning away from healthier foods because of inflation. They're looking to buy cheaper processed meals as the bills crisis bites. It quotes Joanne Farrer, who lives on welfare, used to serve her 3 children stews of fresh veg. Now she's more likely to give them chicken nuggets and fries because it's cheaper. I didn't know that processed food was cheaper.
No, it's not. That's nonsense. That's complete nonsense. I think where there's a dichotomy in all of this is that really good food, you know, which is not expensive to buy, so the cheaper cuts of meat, for example, take longer to cook. And now we've got the energy crisis, so people are thinking, I can't put something in the oven for an hour and a half or 2 hours. But slow cookers are great. You know, they work like a little light bulb. You plug them in, you leave them on all day. That's what we do at home. Much better to buy a really, really inexpensive cut of meat, right, and some really good vegetables and let it cook slowly in a slow cooker. That is nonsense.
Well,
unless it's a fish finger sandwich, which I'm in favour of.
I was going to ask Esther what her story was, but as she was ignoring mine, I'm tempted to ignore hers as well, Kevin. So,
but you know you won't.
Go on. Go on.
Well, mine is obviously, which has been rumbling on all week, well, maybe for many, many months, and this is sort of the royal family now cashing in on its name. So, yes, we saw that with Harry, with his new book, with his Netflix deal, with Meghan, but you've now got Mike Tindall going into I'm a Celebrity, get me out of here. And once that happens, I think, gosh, is this damaging the royal family? He's also got an advert, hasn't he, with the pizza company. He's also doing something for Amazon Prime. And then you look into what Zara does and all her sponsorships and different sort of financial contracts there. And I have to say, this to me is the slippery slope for those royals and the secondary royals, and maybe that's why Charles is going to make the royal family or the key royal family even smaller.
Well, when I was a kid, I remember being at school watching the royal family doing It's a Knockout.
That's right.
And
where did that end? That was a disaster. But completely. Were they cashing in on that, or was that meant to be? That was for charity. It was a bit of a joke because that was a big TV programme at the time, but it did end badly. You know, this is worse. This is taking significant sums, and there's a huge payback. I mean, you know, Harry's got £35 million for a 4-book deal. You're going to be dishing the dirt on.
And on that, Esther, I mean, yeah, 35 to 38 mil apparently, and that's you know the beginning of it for him. Remember, but also then the story comes out. Yeah, but he's giving a big contribution to charity. 1.5 million is going to charity allegedly, right? The rest of it, where does that go in the pocket? I agree. I think the whole way the royal family now are commercialising upon their royalty is detrimental to the standards that we have in this country.
Remember Sarah Ferguson a long time ago when she had her first book deal saying how much was going to charity? They looked into that similar sort of thing, a tiny percentage, but you were selling it on the back of that. No, I think this is bad, and it really seems to be gathering a pace since the Queen's passing. wrestling.
By the way, I did read today somewhere that W.H. Smith, I'm sure all the bookshops are available, but W.H. Smith are already selling Harry's book at half price. It hasn't even come out yet.
Really?
It's still already... You can pre-order.
So will you read it? Will you read it? Will you read the book?
Well, I will if we're doing the show. I do. I will read it. I want to know what is put in there. So that's my excuse, and I'll be getting it for Christmas. But we want to hear your views. Don't forget GB views at gbnews.uk. What are you thinking about any of these stories that we're talking about?
Yeah. Kevin, what else have you got?
This is a great story. It's called The Grapes of Wrath. This is French wine is the wine to have. It's allegedly, you know, everybody says, right, I'm going to go for a really good Bordeaux, Saint-Emilion, Petrus, Pomerol, all of those wonderful wines. There's the investigators in Bordeaux have found this gigantic fraud whereby 5 million bottles of cheap Spanish plonk were moved over to France and put into Bordeaux bottles, right? So people were buying what they thought was fabulous French wines, which in truth were just Spanish plonk. They did this, and there are 5 suspects actually going through the courts at the moment. There's €4.5 million been made on this particular fraud, right? Okay. It's detrimental. The big problem for Bordeaux is Bordeaux has built up a reputation over many, 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 many years, and a good reputation. If it's a Bordeaux wine, you're pretty sure it's going to be okay, right? But it's detrimental to the reputation of Bordeaux, so consequently they're going for this big fashion. And there is this whole thing with Bordeaux wines. I remember, for me, I have a big problem with it because driving through France to Spain one year, and we stopped at this lovely little chateau in Bordeaux, ordered a really beautiful wine, and the sommelier comes along and he opens the wine, and he's got a lovely little chain and a little silver dish, and he pours the wine into that, and he drinks it, and he spits it into a spittoon, and he starts to pour the wine. I'm paying for the wine. I'd like to taste the wine myself. I don't want somebody assuring me.
That was wine snobbery.
But the question there is, would this sommelier recognise that this was a cheap Spanish wine?
Probably explains why I was spitting it out, Kevin. Thank you very much.
Pleasure, no problem.
See you at 11. Now, this week it was revealed that 2 members of the Rochdale grooming gang lost an appeal against deportation after a 7-year legal battle.
Adil Khan and Qari Abdul Rauf, who were both convicted back in 2012 of various offences against children, were told back in August that they would be sent to Pakistan after release from prison for the public good.
Joining us now to discuss the story further is the former Labour MP for Rochdale, Simon Danchuk. Simon, thank you for joining us. This is a terrible state of affairs that's been going on for many years, including when you were the MP for Rochdale. Just how big was this grooming scandal back in Rochdale?
It was a massive story, a really significant case. Back in 2012, I was the Member of Parliament. The story broke. I'd only been in Parliament about 2 years. I met with Girl A, as she became known in this particular case. And one of the significant issues that I remember, you were talking earlier about Chief Constables. Peter Fahey, the Chief Constable at the time, came to to Rochdale and said, "I've arrived to celebrate multiculturalism." Well, that went down like a lead balloon. I mean, the idea that Greater Manchester Police were doing a good job has been found to be quite the contrary. It was a big story at the time, and it's still a big story now.
What I don't understand about this, Simon, is that there's a law in place, it's been in place for some time, that if you're sent to prison for over a year, that you are automatically deported if you're a foreign national. I can't quite work out why it's taken so long to deport these people. I thought these things happened automatically.
Well, it should certainly have happened by now. I campaigned whilst I was an MP to get them deported. Such a convoluted process. And we have a criminal justice system that is more on the side of the perpetrators and supportive of the legal profession more than it is of the victim. One of the ringleaders in this case actually has been able he revoked his own Pakistani citizenship. These two, hopefully, will now be deported, but it has taken 10 years, more than £500 of taxpayers' money in an attempt to defend them and in an attempt to prop up the legal service. It's outrageous, to be quite frank.
Simon, I'll just repeat what it was, the arguments for them to stay in this country. They said one was because they were going to be a role model to their son and it fringed their human rights. And the other ones, as you said, they had certificates denouncing their Pakistani citizenship. Sorry, our signal broke up there. I was going to repeat that. And as you say, the public taxpayer has spent over £500,000 to do this. So I knew we'll try and get him back. I know the signal there, we were losing there. But if you remember at the time just how disturbing and how bad this was for the local community relations, how people didn't want to investigate what was going on because, as Simon mentioned there was this political correctness going in as well as having to serve the community. But these were vulnerable young girls, very young, some in care, that you had a whole grooming gang taking advantage of. I believe we've got Simon back. Here he is. So I'm saying the impact on the local community there to have a whole group of people who weren't being investigated. What was being said? You were the MP at the time.
Absolutely. The situation was that you had Muslim men raping Christian girls simply because they saw them as inferior. That's the reality of it. And as a Labour MP, I had senior Labour politicians telling me not to mention the ethnicity of the perpetrators. And I found that at the time absolutely outrageous, because I think senior Labour politicians saw the effect it could have in terms of damaging Labour votes in Asian communities. And I think that's a sort of argument and reason that this sort of situation continued for so long.
I'm going to ask you a personal question, Simon. So where did you find the strength or the support to carry on this fight when actually it was an uphill struggle?
Yeah, absolutely. I struggled with dealing with this particular issue. It wasn't the sort of issue that I was familiar with. I don't have a background in social work or anything. There was no support services for me as an individual member of Parliament in terms of dealing with many victims of child abuse. So I did struggle with it, but I was also determined to bring it to light. And I'm pleased to say that I was an architect of the historic child abuse inquiry, which reported very recently. So we had some good results, but this has been an example of a bad result where they haven't been deported on time.
Simon Danchuk, thank you very much indeed for joining us this morning. It is a terrible situation. Just to remind people, in Rochdale, it was reported that 47 girls as young as 12 were actually raped by these people, plied with alcohol, and yet it's taken 7 years to deport people. I just find the whole criminal justice system
amongst a gang of 9 of them. And so again, we want to hear your views. That was, Simon Danchuk there did stand up, didn't he, pretty much as a single person to fight this cause.
And in my area of Bradford, Anne Cryer, a Labour MP in Keighley, was also very, very brave in speaking up about these things.
And don't you remember, we interviewed Rishi Sunak
about this?
About exactly before he became Prime Minister. Phil and I did an exclusive for GBNews, and he was determined that he was going to increase the sentencing. He was going to absolutely treat this as something of paramount importance and deal with this straight away.
There were 2 things he said in particular. One is that he wanted the ethnicity of the offenders to be recorded, which isn't at the moment, and he also said that he wanted people to be given life sentences when convicted, with very limited scope for parole.
Yeah.
So he was very, very tough on that. So hopefully he'll see that through now he's Prime Minister.
Well, we will be making sure, and I think we need to get him back on GB to see what he's doing there. But coming up, we'll be looking at comments made this week by a US talk show host and asking whether Britain really is a racist country. Don't go anywhere.
Every morning from 6 o'clock, we'll wake you up with GB News Breakfast with all the stories you didn't know from the night before.
So whether it's serious news, entertainment, or your own views from all over our great nation, we're here to kick off your day with a smile.
And the national media should be reflecting and reporting what's happening here.
You will notice the northwestern accents.
Whether you're with us on TV, radio, or online, every morning, it's breakfast from 6 a.m. Hope you can join us.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton Tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
Hello, I'm Simon Evans. Join me on GB News for Headliners at 11 p.m, where I'll be joined by two of the country's top comedians as we take a look at tomorrow's newspapers tonight. If it's a big story, we'll be covering it, I guarantee, but we'll also have some fun along the way. That's GB News Headliners at 11 p.m. We won't put you to sleep, unlike some of the other paper review shows out there. So join us, 11 p.m, 7 nights a week.
Hello there, it's Eamon Holmes here from Breakfast on GB News. We're not just on your television and your screens, you know.
We're on DAB plus digital radio, so you can listen to your favourite shows on the move.
If you've not yet listened to GB News Radio, it's very simple. We're on your radio player and TuneIn apps, on your smart speaker, phone or tablet, or online at gbnews.uk.
Take us with you wherever you go. GB News Radio.
You never have to miss a moment of the People's Channel.
Welcome back. It's 10:25. Rishi Sunak has insisted Britain is not a racist country after a US talk show host claimed there had been a backlash over the country's first Asian Prime Minister.
The popular host, maybe is, maybe isn't, I heard his viewing figures were falling, Trevor Noah insisted there were people saying that Indians are going to take over Great Britain in response to Sunak becoming the Prime Minister.
Joining us now is Dr. Rakib Eshan, a research analyst and culture writer. Thank you so much for joining us. I've been puzzled by this. I mean, I haven't seen any backlash in the UK about Rishi Sunak being from an ethnic minority. Have I missed something, or have you not seen it either?
No, I don't think you've missed anything, Philip. This is nothing but fabrication, in my view. Using the term backlash suggests that there's a significant amount of people in Britain, in the white British mainstream, who are upset over Rishi Sunak becoming our first non-white Prime Minister. That is simply not the case. If there is a group of people who feel that way, it is a feeling which is very much on the fringes of society, at the margins. The vast majority of British people, irrespective of their racial, ethnic or religious background, are either actively welcoming of the fact that we have our first non-white Prime Minister, or they simply think that ethnicity is irrelevant. Their focus is more on policy substance and quality of governance.
And to use an American expression, was this host projecting his views on the world? Was it more revealing about him than the actual truth of the situation? Because I'm looking here, we've got obviously a Muslim who's the mayor of London. The Home Secretary is a Buddhist. And then we've got the only, as it were, white main Secretary of State, Jeremy Hunt, is married to a Chinese wife. So if anything, Britain has always been sort of multicultural. So is it him projecting his views on a subject he knows very little about?
Well, I think that there's a great deal of accuracy in that. US commentators, especially of a liberal left disposition, what they tend to do is project their own national histories, ideas and experiences onto countries which are vastly different in terms of their social history and cultural background. The reality of the matter is, for all its flaws, Britain is one of the most successful examples of a multiracial democracy in the modern world. And I think that's reflected by the degree of diversity at the very top of our politics, business, media and entertainment. And I'd really make the point that when it comes to its broader legal framework, Britain is one of the most anti-discrimination and pro-equality places on earth. And it certainly fares much better than other European countries, especially those in the EU, such as France, Germany and the Netherlands, when it comes to providing anti-discrimination protections on the grounds of race, ethnicity and religion.
Rakib, I mean, we actually interviewed Delta Poll yesterday, who said that the bounce in the polls for Rishi Sunak was exactly the same as you would expect for any new leader of a political party. So that would show, beyond any doubt, I would have thought, that there hasn't been any kind of backlash. I just wondered what role organisations like Black Lives Matter play in this kind of perception, perhaps, because, of course, they sort of go around trying to see racism everywhere and point out that, you know, everywhere's racist. Do you think that their activities make other people think that, well, maybe Britain is a much more racist country than it actually is?
I think that's a possibility. I think when you look at existing polling, there's one poll conducted by Opinion, I believe it was in November 2020, which showed that the majority of Brits felt that Black Lives Matter was responsible for heightening racial tensions, and that included a plurality of ethnic minority Britons. I think the problem with the Black Lives Matter movement is that it views and presents very complex social, economic and cultural dynamics through a reductive prism of race. And that prism of race is problematic because it misses other factors which feed into racial disparities that we see in the UK. Family structure, which part of the country people live in, and the kind of dynamics which exist in their local community, what are the true markers of social status in their local neighbourhood. So you can see that when you're looking at those disparities, there's so many factors which feed into that. And I think that the presentation of Britain being a fundamentally racist country is simply not rooted in reality.
Dr. Rakib, thank you very much indeed for joining us this morning. So if you've got a view or opinion on that, don't forget to email us gbviews@gbnews.uk. And as well as that poll that showed that Rishi Sunak had a bounce in the polls like any other leader would have, his personal poll rating actually was significantly higher, full stop. Yeah. So I guess that must tell a tale if his own personal ratings are shot up. Now next, Tom Jones, not the singer. Sadly, we're not bringing you him. But a Tory councillor has said he will not apologise for wearing a poppy after Twitter critics called him a poppy TW, expletive that we can't say on the TV.
The councillor for Scotland and Lower Wensleydale in North Yorkshire wore the symbolic red flower during a TV appearance on Monday and quickly received a barrage of online hate. Jones refused to apologise, saying that remembrance is all year round and that he's proud to show support to the armed forces.
Well, we're delighted to say that Tom Jones joins us now. So why, Tom, wear your poppy so early?
I'm afraid these jokes just aren't unusual, are they?
We've used that one as well, Tom, so don't you worry.
Well, you know, it's ironic that I'm saying this on national television, but I don't get the chance to go on national television very often. And I was invited onto ITV. I'm really lucky in that I represent a large part of Catterick Garrison and a lot of veterans. And a lot of current service people as well. And I just wanted to basically put my poppy on as a mark of respect for their service. You know, I didn't understand wearing a poppy in late October was going to be quite so controversial, to be quite honest with you.
Yeah, I'm sure there are other worse things you could have done, but oh no, wearing a poppy put you right out there in the Twitter sphere, didn't it?
So what date was it, by the way, Tom? What date was it that you wore your poppy that you got a backlash?
It was the 24th, so this Monday, last week in October.
Yeah, the day we got a new Prime Minister, the day... Well, it was my birthday, that's why I remember the day so well. So, OK, so now I have to say, there is a little controversy here going on because Philip thinks you shouldn't wear them before the 1st of November. But would you have attacked Tom on Twitter for wearing one?
Well, no, it seems... I mean, I would have thought it was a personal preference rather than sort of a massive rule. And I couldn't see... Actually, I looked on the Royal British Legion website, Tom, to see if there was any particular date that they gave. And there seemed to be... I couldn't find any reference to a date that you should start wearing it. Where did all this backlash... Who was giving you the backlash? Who did it come from?
It's just from the kind of usual Twitter people, really. I think it's quite sad, actually, because, you know, as far as I'm concerned, our country owes a debt of service to our servicemen, and we should always be striving to pay that debt down. And I think the poppy is a mark of respect, for people who sacrifice so much to defend Britain's history, Britain's tradition, Britain's values. And I'm just kind of slightly disappointed that it would be kind of soiled in this way. It feels like it's cheapening it as a symbol, and it cheapens what it represents somehow.
And I think it's positive for me, wear it as long as possible because you want people to buy them. It goes to a wonderful cause. I know if I get the paper poppy and I've only ever got it for a day, so if it goes from a week to a couple of weeks, I've given more money straight away because I lose them all the time. But a question to you, will you be changing your habits then? Has this made you think, I can't put one on late October, I will wait till later, or has it made you more defiant? Will you be wearing one now from about June?
Well, it has made some changes because I'm sure enough people have seen that photo. I did go and get a shave and a haircut because I look ridiculous, frankly.
I thought you looked very dapper, Tom.
Not in that photo, I don't. I look like if a Regency courtier had a kid with Rolf, the dog from the Muppets. No, it hasn't. If I were given the chance again, I would absolutely wear it again at the same time. I wouldn't wear one all year round if I could, because I do think it's a seasonal thing. But, I do think that actually we need to take more time throughout the whole course of the year to remember our service people and remember the sacrifice they made. It shouldn't be a matter of 11 days in November. It should be year round.
And just quickly, Tom, your ward, as I understand it, will be in Rishi Sunak's constituency in Richmond. We were just discussing about, the allegations from Americans that, there's been a racist backlash to Rishi Sunak becoming Prime Minister. I just wondered if you could tell us what the reaction's been locally in the Richmond constituency to Rishi Sunak becoming Prime Minister.
Well, Rishi around here is incredibly popular because of the great work he does. People just recognise him as a fantastic MP. They recognise his talent. That's why this seat is now safer under Rishi, and I know he loves telling this. This seat is now safer under Rishi than it was under William Hague, because people recognise talent. And, I think as for all this kind of American stuff, frankly, when all you've got is a hammer, everything looks like a nail, doesn't it? When you can only see the world through that prism, that's the only way you can see the world.
Councillor Tom Jones, thank you very much indeed for joining us. And our message to you is don't let the Twitter haters get to you. You do what you want. You keep wearing your poppy whenever you want to. That's our message to you, Tom. But thanks for joining us this morning.
And we put our poppies on as well.
I still think it's a bit early.
Well, but we put it on.
But we'd love to know what you think about when people should start wearing a poppy. Let us know. gbviews@gbnews.uk. See whether you agree with me it should be November or whether you think, like Tom,
get it on in October.
Earlier. Anyway, coming up after the break, we'll be talking about the migrant crisis as Rishi Sunak seeks a deal to curb channel crossings. So don't go away.
Weekday afternoons on GB News, we've got the whole of the UK covered. From 12 to 3, it's GB News Day with me, Mark Longhurst.
And me, Gloria Di Piero. You'll get the very latest on everything that's been going on across our great nation.
And from 3 till 6, watch out for GB News Live with me, Patrick Christie's. I'm not here to mess around. With all the biggest topics and guests, you will always be up to date. GB News Day and GB News Live from 12 p.m.
Only on GB News.
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hi there, it's Stephen and Anne.
At breakfast from 6 a.m, you'll always be caught up with everything you need to know, the latest headlines, opinions and debates.
We'll bring you the good news and the bad, but most of all, we're here for you.
Remember, send in your views and let us know what you would like us to talk about.
That's because we're your news channel. And every morning at 6 a.m, it's breakfast on GB News.
Join me, Nana Akue, on Friday, Saturday and Sunday afternoons on GB News. Expect fiery debate and passionate discussion as me and my panel tackle some of the biggest topics hitting the headlines. It's a place for everyone's opinion. No one gets cancelled, but no one gets an easy ride.
Oh, she's on it today!
Be ready for conversations that are fierce, frank, and of course, fun every Friday, Saturday, and Sunday afternoon from 4 p.m. on GB News.
On Mark Dolan tonight, we have a simple plan, which is to inform, stimulate, and entertain in equal measure. It's all about getting your opinions on the national television airwaves. I love my viewer emails, mark@gbnews.uk. So do join me from 9 p.m. to midnight every Friday, Saturday, and Sunday for big guests, big opinions, and a big presenter. 6'5", don't you know? See you then on GB News.
Welcome back. Lots of you have been getting in touch.
David says, Mike Tindall is not a royal. He's married to his wife, who does not have a title, nor is on the civil list. He's a sportsman celebrity. How else does he earn a living?
And Dennis says, I'm an HCA and nurses have had 2 pay rises. Good rises too. NHS has more money than ever spent on it, but it's directed to the wrong areas. It's always on pointless management roles and vanity projects. We don't need to spend more money there. We need to spend it better.
And the point that Kevin Woodford made about all of the woke agenda of the NHS has certainly stimulated quite a lot of comments. Natasha says, I was a nurse but left because of the woke agenda, which seems to be more important than proper patient care. My daughter was wondering whether to do her nurse training but decided not to because of all this nonsense. So that's one less nurse for the NHS.
And then James comes out with this. Whilst we're all aware of why we are experiencing inflation, I'm also very aware that many companies are clearly using this as an excuse to inflate prices. Keep your views coming in to gbviews@gbnews.uk. Want to hear from you. Now, almost 40,000 migrants have crossed the English Channel on small boats so far this year, which is a new record.
Rishi Sunak told President Macron that Britain and France needed to make the Channel migrant route completely unviable in their first conversation since he became Prime Minister. And a new deal is reportedly close to being signed, which will include a minimum number of French officials patrolling beaches at any one time.
Joining us now is the chairman of Migration Watch UK, Alp Mehmet. So, good to have you with us here today, but I know you were watching the show a little bit earlier on and you wanted to pass comment.
If I may, what Dr. Rakib Ehsan, who's a great man, what he was saying, I'd like to associate myself with what he said. As the country's first ethnic minority ambassador, I've a lot of experience of this country's ways when it comes to integration and becoming a part of this country. And what this American comedian is saying, frankly, is a nonsense. And the less we talk about it, frankly, the better, because it's total tosh.
So, Al, thank you for that. Going back to the figures, these record numbers of people crossing over the channel, people are getting angry. Our viewers are getting angry. I'm getting angry about it. Is there a solution?
Of course there's a solution. There's always a solution, and at some point we will find it. I think that Rishi Sunak actually has the determination. I think also that in Suella Braverman, he has got the right Home Secretary to deal with it. It will take time, but so long as we've got that determination, we do work with the French and we show really a bit more will about removing those with no right to be here and quickly, then I think ultimately we'll be sending the right messages out to those who are making pots of money out of trafficking people here.
And I was going to say, well, you know, the numbers are significant. We've just said that, you know, the highest number, nearly 40,000 so far this year. But is the impact that is now having, you know, you're reading in the papers, supposedly, the Home Office is asking people, will they house these people? We've run out of, as it seems, hotel accommodation. We're paying £7 million a day to accommodate these people. It's bigger than people entering the country. It's the disruptive impacts it's having on everybody in this country.
Absolutely, and this is on top of all the other immigration the settlement arrangements that we've got with Hong Kong, the Ukrainian people. I'm not suggesting that that shouldn't have happened, but the fact is these are a lot of people that we've got to look after, we've got to house, and we're not dealing with those who with spurious claims quickly enough. That is substantially what's behind all the queues and the delays and the fact that they're more and more coming.
Asylum applications, we're only doing our 4% a year. Is that the problem then? We're not doing that quick enough, and how do we make sure that we do?
Absolutely. How indeed. Again, the Prime Minister has said that he wants cases to be dealt with within 6 months. I think that's far too long, frankly. With over 100,000 now going through the system, we've got to act more quickly. We also, I know conditions are difficult in the camps. Of course they are, when you've got this many people arriving so quickly. So we must improve that. But at the same time, I think we've got to have holding areas for those coming here. We've got to have it and indeed deal with them quickly and remove them.
Now, people might be groaning at home when they hear this thing about, Rishi Sunak's asking the French to have more patrols, because, of course, we've had over years, paying money to France to do this and the other, when they seem to have done absolutely nothing. I mean, do you think that France is the key to the solution to this, or are we just going to have to accept that France are never going to do enough and we're going to have to sort it out ourselves?
I think France would like to do more. They are constrained by the sort of arrangements that they are in. For example, the Schengen area arrangements with Albania. Albanians can actually come into the EU, no questions asked, and stay for 90 days. With the Schengen arrangements being what they are, you can go to any one of 27 countries, frankly, without having to be asked anything or show your identity documents. Of course, many of those will end up coming to Calais and finding their way over in boats. But last year, there were over nearly 650,000 asylum applications that we know of in the EU. All those are not going to be granted asylum in France or Germany or wherever. A lot of them will be denied. A lot of them will end up on the North French coast, and that, I'm afraid, will continue. So we do have to work with the EU, and the EU does have to get its act together with regard to its external borders.
Now, it seems like whack-a-mole for the government. The government sort of does something. It passed the Nationality and Borders Bill and that act, which allowed people to be deported to Rwanda, and then the court stepped in and said you couldn't do that because of human rights and all this kind of stuff. And we've now got the Modern Slavery Act. Alice was telling us in the news how people are just saying, I've been trafficked, I'm a slave, you can't deport me. I mean, is the Human Rights Act the problem? Is it the European Convention on Human Rights? Is it the Modern Slavery Act? I mean, what is it that the government needs to sort out in order to get to the bottom of this?
Well, dare I say that is something that is incumbent on you two and your colleagues on the back benches to make sure that the laws that are passed are court-proof, if you like. Clearly, that wasn't thought through. I think that there is room for improvement. If we need to resile from the ECHR, so be it. Let's do that. But that in itself will not stop thousands of people making their way across the channel. Nor, might I add, is this nonsense, I think, of providing safe routes for people able to apply for visas in any one of the European countries in order to be granted asylum. That's going to be overwhelmed within days, frankly. And what do we do when they are denied asylum? Where do they go then?
Alp Maymat from Migration Watch, thank you very much indeed for joining us this morning.
You know what, Alp mentioned there the figures on Albanians coming to this country, and in 2020 it was 50. Last year it was 800, and this year it was 12,000 from a safe country. To hear 10,000 of those are men, and what we're saying is, why do you need to come here again? We want to hear your views. Now, it's been voted Britain's best place to fly from, but now Doncaster Sheffield Airport is at risk of closure. The owners have blamed the decision on Terminal failing to produce a profit, stating that continuing to operate is no longer financially viable.
We're joined now by local MP Nick Fletcher, who's been fighting to keep the airport open. Nick, it's a bit of, I mean, I'm from Doncaster originally. It's a bit of a kick in the teeth for the local economy that the airport's going to close, but Peel say that it's not financially viable, it's making a loss. So why should they just keep racking up losses?
I do think it is financially viable. Obviously, we've come through COVID, which has been a real test for this market. But no, I genuinely think with the right owner operator, it is a viable airport.
What's the solution to this particular point? Who should be stepping in if Peel, who own it, don't want to run it as an airport, they don't want to sell it to somebody else? Who can do so? I mean, what's the solution here? It seems to me that there isn't a solution in those circumstances.
Well, I've asked for the Combined Authority to step in. We've got a similar situation in Teesside with Ben Houchin. He had the same problem again with Peel, and he did step in. He purchased the airport and is now making a success of it.
But is it a success? Because I was reading, everyone was saying it was still making losses, and now the only difference is it's the taxpayer having to pick up the losses rather than a private company. And lots of people say that, you know, taxpayers should not be paying for airports, however much it might be convenient to people in the local area.
I think the Ben Houchin, with what his model is up there, is that he understands the significance of airports to economic growth. And although the airports may struggle, and they do struggle from time to time, they are a key part of economic growth for the Teesside area. And we're seeing an awful lot of investment come into Teesside. And that's exactly what I want for the Sheffield Combined Authority to take note of. They called this, it wasn't just a transport issue. They realised back in 2017 that it was an essential economic driver for the area. And I want them to look back at that statement that they said there and act on it. And that's what I've asked all the way through this. Now, they have put an offer on the table to Peel to cover their losses for the next 13 months, while hopefully an investor can be found who wants to come along and make a real success of the airport. And I do believe now that they are actually in talks with somebody. But I believe the Combined Authority have been slow to the table. And they should have done more to actually help the airport over the last 3 to 5 years.
Yeah, Nick, I couldn't agree with you more. You know, this was an airport that Which magazine had as the best airport in the UK. As you say, I'm sure flights obviously had gone down during the COVID period, but you do want to build it back up and you do want to bring investment to the area. So we wish you all the best of luck there to champion that cause. And as you say, it's an important airport for the region.
Just remind us, Nick, when is it due to close, the airport? When is it actually?
It's due to close next Friday. The last TUI departure happened last night, which was quite sad to see. I know there's an awful lot of emotion at the airport, an awful lot of people going to lose their jobs. So it is really tragic, but it's more tragic for the entire region over the coming years. It's it'll be extremely disappointing, and I will be asking for a public inquiry if it does close.
Well, keep us informed on that. We want to know what happens with that public inquiry. Nick Fletcher, thank you very much indeed. I think that's devastating news. We are an island. You know, there's ways you've got to fly in, you've got to come out by boat. It's important as we look forward to be this global entity that we are. We need to have airports anyway. We're now joined in the studio to talk about some of the biggest stories this week from the legal world. It's friend of the show, Andrew Eborn. Great to have you here.
Lovely to see you, and congratulations on the first question in PMQs. I love seeing Phil do that. It's a real sense of joy, which is one. And it's been a monumental week again in the legal world. We've had Elon Musk is now the big twit, so the chief twit, as he calls himself, as we predicted on the show. You had Kanye West, yay, and his waxwork is now being melted down, and so on and so forth. And Harry, his publication, the date has now been announced, the 10th of January, for Spare. Spare me, spare all of us. But spare no one, is I think what the publications are saying. What they're saying is going to be raw and unflinching, revelation, is what they're saying in the press release, about the royal family. And it raises all sorts of questions, and we've been talking about defamation. Harry and his wonderful wife are no strangers to the courts, because they will turn around and sue anybody who says anything terrible about them. Thank you. They won't sue me. They won't sue me. They're great chums. I always say positive things. It's always got to be good. But the reality of it is that in order for it to be a success and raise all that money, there have to be those revelations. And that's what they say in the press release. They talk about a personal journey from trauma to victory and being comforted. But there will be those revelations. And it's very sad, I think, because it used to be, Benjamin Disraeli said, never complain, never explain. That was his mantra, if you like, which was taken on by the royal family. Now Her Majesty is no longer with us, and that was what she did throughout her life. She never commented on anything, really. And I think it's a really, really difficult thing on that sort of basis. So time will tell what they will reveal, but certainly from a legal position, the question about defamation will be there. And you can guarantee that the lawyers will be going through with a fine-tooth comb, working out what can be said and what can't be said.
I guess it's all right, defamation laws being in place. And of course, they're very different in America and in the UK. They're much more stringent.
Different approach, as we saw with Johnny Depp, absolutely.
Much more stringent in the UK than they are in the US. But I guess if Harry says unpleasant and maybe untruthful things about the King or his brother, it's difficult to see either of them actually suing him, isn't it? So it gives him a bit more of a free rein than you might think.
And it's very sad on that sort of basis. That Oprah interview, wasn't it, where you have the general blanket accusation about racism or so on and so forth, and that sort of stuff. We're not sure whether it's going to be a revelation or whether it's going to be more of a journey about his sort of mental health and an inspirational tale on that sort of basis.
But the King is getting his way back in a different way. So they might not be able to sue and they might not do other things, don't, complain, don't explain. But he has removed, hasn't he, some of those ceremonial titles. Today, the one that Harry wanted, which was the Captain General of the Royal Navy, that was removed today. Supposedly nothing to do with the book, but he has the power to do that. Yeah. And now King Charles has got it instead. So maybe this is the way which makes you less and less royal.
Yeah. The other thing, by the way, is that the book, the cover of the book,
yes,
Harry's book and Andre Agassi's book, are virtually identical. In fact, I'm not sure you could tell which was which.
Well, J.R. Muringer is the ghostwriter on both of those books, and Agassi in a book called Open in 2009. If you have a look at both of them, there they are, side by side. You can see, staring directly into camera, one-word answer on that sort of basis. So absolutely, that is that sort of side.
Well, Andrew Agassi won't be suing Harry then for the cover of...
But that would be interesting. We could take that case on. That'd be worthwhile. But it's the same ghostwriter for both books.
But it also shows, in a way, doesn't it, his lack of individuality, Harry. It shows the fact that he is copying in one way or another, getting somebody else to write the book, getting somebody else to do the front cover of the book, talking about his family. To me, it's diminishing him somewhat.
I thought Meghan was the ghostwriter.
Well, maybe she is, but friends of mine in the States are now saying that they don't want them. They're sort of saying, can't you have them back?
Well, I really hope that this will be an inspirational tale. They claim in the press release that it will be inspirational. So it's Harry's journey. It starts, you remember that dramatic picture of him walking behind the coffin of his mother, Diana, and talking about that terrible journey that he's had in the sort of public eye, with the spare, because he's an heir and a spare on that sort of basis. So I hope it will be inspirational rather than necessarily airing dirty laundry.
35 million for a 4-book deal, so it will be. And I think as well this week the royal family were somewhat upset because of the Netflix documentary he's doing, and they did the filming at the Alma Tunnel where Princess Diana died, and they were doing that. So if this is anything to go by, they really are digging up, aren't they? I don't know, all the old stories.
And I think that's absolutely right. And the backlash about the Crown and so on and so forth, about now they put that effectively a disclaimer on to say, look, some of this is fictionalised. So we need to sort of look at that, question everything, and it's a question of balance with all of these stories.
It's a hell of a lot of books they're going to have to sell to get their money back.
Serialisation rights. Are you going to buy one?
Well, we've already said, we'll definitely read that one.
I said I won't.
He won't, but I will. If we're talking about it, we need to know what's in there. It might not be as bad as you say. I remember that happening with the Call Me Dave book, and I remember reading it because David Cameron said, oh, it was awful, it was awful. I read it, and actually there was only 2 bad lines in it. The rest of it was quite sycophantic, so that's why you should always read things.
Andrew, thank you very much indeed.
Pleasure to see you both.
As always. That's it for the first hour here. Don't go anywhere. We'll be back after this short break.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday, and there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch. You've been cancelled. Join the club.
Oh my goodness me.
And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilised conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
We are GB News.
And we'd like to say thank you
To each and every one of you.
For helping our great nation
Find its voice.
We're absolutely everywhere.
across England, Scotland,
Wales and Northern Ireland. On TV.
On radio.
and online. We're proud to be the People's Channel, Britain's
News channel.
On the Mark Steyn Show, we cover the stories a lot of people are scared even to mention. The stuff that really matters with some of the world's biggest thinkers.
Now is his opportunity to kind of take the steering wheel of history.
Break away from the flop at 8 o'clock on GB News with the Mark Steyn Show.
Every Saturday at 2 o'clock, join me, Darren Grimes, for Real Britain. I'm not afraid to give you a platform and say it how it is.
Come on, make the case. Something like this is very, very important to people.
And we're always up for a laugh on this show.
God, honestly, you'd think there were no problems in the world.
Real Britain, every Saturday on GB News.
Hello, I'm Michelle Dewberry and you can join me every weekday 6 till 7 on Jubes and Kerr. Me and my panel will get stuck right into the day's events and I can tell you, in fact, I can warn you, expect some robust debates, some strong opinions and perspectives from both sides of the fence. It's about you at home as well. I love to read out all of your comments, or at least as many as I can. So join me, Michelle Dewberry, Monday to Friday, 6 till 7 on Jubes and Kerr.
Good morning and welcome back to Saturday Morning with Esther and Phil.
Coming up this hour, after criticisms of Liz Truss's public speaking, we ask an expert exactly what makes a good orator.
We'll also be looking at the most bizarre stories a little bit later on that's happening in the newspapers, and also why and how did COVID-19 truly come about? Was it a leak from a Chinese lab after all?
And key news views coming in. Email us at gbviews@gbnews.uk or tweet us at gbnews. But first, it's time for the headlines with Alice.
Good morning. It's just gone 11 o'clock. I'm Alice Porter in the GB newsroom. A whistleblower at an asylum processing centre in Kent has told GB News the government is not acknowledging the true extent of the crisis there. The worker at the Manston military base claims violence, disease and attempts of self-harm are a daily occurrence at the facility. The processing centre is only supposed to hold asylum seekers for no more than 24 hours before transferring them to longer-term accommodation, but many have allegedly been there weeks in unsuitable living conditions. Former Chief Immigration Officer Kevin Saunders says the problem lies with the legislation.
80% of people coming across the Channel are from Albania. And we do have legislation, of course, that we can remove them. However, and here's the problem, the people that advise these refugees are saying, just say to the UK authorities that you've been trafficked, because once you've said that, they can't remove you.
The head of the Royal Navy has ordered an investigation into what he's called abhorrent allegations of sexual assault and harassment in the submarine service. Admiral Sir Ben Key says the behaviour will not be tolerated, is totally unacceptable and not a true reflection of what service life should be. He says anyone who is found to be culpable will be held accountable regardless of their rank or status. The Foreign Secretary says countries need to work together to starve terrorists of money and technology. Addressing a United Nations meeting in India, James Cleverly urged allied states to tackle terror groups' use of technology to recruit and radicalise people. He called for more pressure to be put on big tech companies.
We're also working with the G7 and Global Internet Forum to counter terrorism. And we continue to press tech companies, amongst whom are some of the internet's biggest players, to crack down even harder on extremist content online.
Russia has declared the end of its Ukraine mobilization campaign. The defense minister told President Putin that the target of 300,000 people had been met, and they will now stop deploying reservists to fight. The controversial move led to tens of thousands of Russian men fleeing the country. Ukraine's President Volodymyr Zelensky says he doubts Moscow is done with calling up soldiers.
We have reports the enemy has completed its mobilization, as if there is no longer a need to send new waves of Russian citizens to the front. We feel very differently on the front lines. Russia are so poorly prepared and equipped, so brutally used by their command, that it allows us to presume that very soon Russia may need a new wave of people to send to the war.
Development experts say the UK is now spending more of its foreign aid budget at home rather than in developing countries. Over £3 billion will be spent domestically this year, with the Centre for Global Development saying much of it is going towards housing refugees, mainly from Ukraine. Rishi Sunak was previously criticised as Chancellor for slashing the foreign development budget and stretching the rules on what counts as aid. A Foreign Office spokesperson says the UK remains one of the largest global aid donors. President Biden has labelled the attack on US House Speaker Nancy Pelosi's husband as despicable. Police say Paul Pelosi was violently assaulted with a hammer at their Californian home yesterday morning. The 82-year-old has undergone surgery for a skull fracture as well as injuries to his right arm and hand. He's expected to make a full recovery. The suspect was arrested and was also taken to hospital. Railway staff in Scotland are staging a 24-hour walkout over a pay dispute. More than 2,000 members of the RMT union are striking, and passengers are being warned to expect widespread disruption. ScotRail say the latest offer gives the lowest paid staff a basic pay increase of almost 7.5%, but the union is calling for a rise that's more in line with inflation. This is GB News. We'll bring you more news as it happens. Now it's back to Esther and Philip.
Thank you, Alice. Now, let's again welcome back celebrity chef and friend of the show, Kevin Woodford, with what's been happening in the papers.
There's a story about the boxer, Conor Benn, that I find quite fascinating. He failed a drugs test, but he's so adamant that he's in the right that he spent £100,000 with scientists to actually identify why the substance clomiphene actually got into the sample. Now, clomiphene it's a substance that's used to mask the use of performance-enhancing testosterone. So obviously that's quite useful. You know, if you can hide the fact that you've been taking something which is going to enhance your ability to punch somebody all over the place, pretty good stuff to have. His argument is this, that during the lead up to the fight, he was eating 3 dozen eggs a week over a long, long period. Now, the eggs, therefore, he claims, obviously chickens, he suggests, are being sort of fed this particular substance because it's also a fertility-enhancing substance, so therefore they're going to produce more eggs, and that's got into a system. Nonsense, apparently, because the Department of Environment, Food and Rural Affairs are saying, look, this drug is not authorised for use in animals in the UK. But it's fascinating that the length somebody will go to actually win £25 million in a boxing
hold on,
match.
he spent £100,000.
He spent £100,000
for advice that the government department have just rubbished in about 10 seconds.
And they'd given him that advice for nothing, right? So he spent 100 grand. He lost the potential of earning 25 million in a fight.
I was going to go home and have a couple of fried eggs to celebrate the benefits that... No,
don't.
Well...
They're not good for you, Philip, anyway.
They're not eggs?
No, they're not.
What, eggs
Not in
generally?
that quantity.
Not in that quantity. You can have 2 occasionally, but think your cholesterol, for goodness sake. You've got
That's
to be...
ruined his full English breakfast every day if he can't have that many eggs.
He has every day, surely, to goodness.
He would have it every meal every day.
You don't get this fat by accident.
No.
Anyway, moving on swiftly. There's a cracking story, page 37 of The Sun today. I love this, Kevin. So basically, cops raced to reports of an armed raid at a manor house to find that it was a porn movie being filmed. So Ramblers told police that they saw men with guns lurking in the grounds of this manor house. And when they went there, these people were actually, they weren't armed men with, they were actors dressed as security guards for this porn film. The headline's a cracking one, "Don't Shoot," which I think is a good a good headline. It actually says as well, "Is this a stick-up? No, it's a cock-up."
Oh, please.
Now, I just thought it was absolutely terrific. Now, I think you were intrigued that the police had actually gone round to investigate a crime, weren't you?
I think it's amazing. It should have been filmed. Wouldn't it? Let's be honest. Police turning up for a crime scene.
I think these Ramblers must have said that somebody had been was being misgendered at the house.
Could have been
that's why the police raced round.
Oh, they could have. They could have really known it was a porn movie that was being filmed, and they thought, let's just pop around, lads, quickly before they film.
Before it's over.
Exactly.
But anyway, there you go. So, page 37 of the Sun.
It appealed to your carry-on sense of humour, didn't it?
I did like the...
You got a carry-on sense of humour. I didn't know that.
I love carry-on films, so I did love the "Is this a stick-up? No, it's a cock-up." I did enjoy that.
If Phil was going to go on Mastermind, trust me, it would be on carry-on movies.
That'd be my
oh my goodness,
subject,
yes, he could.
Well, very, very briefly, when we worked at Pinewood Film Studios for a year, and Peter Rogers, who was the man for I had a cup of tea with him in his office. Seriously. And his car used to park right outside the front of the studios, and he had the most wonderful PA. She must have been 94, right? And we sat in his office, and she brought in tea and biscuits. But by the time the tea and biscuits had arrived, the tea had floated over onto the biscuits, and all the biscuits were soggy because this poor old girl, bless her heart, was wonderful, but she just shook her way through this.
I've watched all the films about 20.
Great.
I saw a little picture yesterday of Rishi dipping his biscuits in his tea. He's a dunker. I just thought I'd let you know. I bet you will appeal to far more people knowing that he dunks. But this is a total different story. This is gyms cool their pools as heating bills prove a drain. So Duncan Bannatyne, the former Dragon's Den star, has had a little bit of a backlash here because he's reduced the temperatures of his swimming pools because he said the heating of this pool, the cost of that has quadrupled. But people who are members are saying, look, we're paying over £70 a month here. We'd like them to be a little bit hotter. He came back on Twitter and says, nothing cool about 28 degrees. It's not too cool. I'd love somebody to go in with a thermometer and check it. I find it like 20
But somebody
degrees.
will, you know that now.
But basically, lots of pools, swimming pools are closing. They won't, various spas and saunas and heating rooms are all closing down. And they said this follows sort of the rest of Europe. France already closed their swimming pools in September time. And it's just, what are they going to do because now of this surge in energy? But anyway, it just made me smile that people are complaining about that. I would as well. I hate cold swimming pools.
Well, but cold... He's turned it down by 1 degree.
No, but
is anyone going to actually... who on earth is going to notice...
Can I tell you, that's why I said they should go with the thermometer, because it probably isn't
it'll
1
be below
degree.
That.
It'll be below there because you wouldn't feel 1 degree. I remember I used to go to a swim pool. I stopped going there because my teeth were chattering, not just for diving in, but about 5 lengths. So I think he's gone well below.
Faster to warm up.
I was trying.
No, I'd pass on that. You wouldn't catch me in a cold pool.
Well, there you go. Yes. So if it goes too cool, actually, you lose all your customers, don't you?
Of course
Listen
you
to
just
YouTube.
say...
No, what,
you don't swim.
I know.
Well,
That's why it's too cold.
Well, so he's saying he's got an opinion and he doesn't go swimming.
Honestly.
For goodness sake.
Come on, Kevin, what else have you got?
There's a quickie, which is a nice one. You'll appreciate this. When you're looking for the best contraceptive in the world, right, the most guaranteed contraceptive, it would appear according to
Just don't do it. Just say no.
That's not an option, Esther, for goodness sake.
Oh, but that's the best one, isn't it? That's the best one.
Yeah, but it's not going to happen, right? The Daily Star have got the answer. I have to be very careful how I say this. You buy a cockapoo, because apparently a cockapoo is the best contraceptive in the world, because cockapoos apparently can identify when you're feeling a bit frisky and when you're likely to fancy a bit of nookie. And the worst thing in the world is when you're feeling a bit romantic and you've just started the process of being romantic, the cockapoo will come into the bedroom and it will stare and it will whine at you, right? Now, if you believe that in the Daily Star, you believe anything. I suggest you go back to the old method, which was you used to go to the barber on a Friday night, get your hair cut and he'd say, do you want anything for the weekend, sir? Do you remember how much they were?
No, I don't.
You're not getting involved, are you?
No, I'm not, no. I was just wondering if that's why cockapoos are called what they're called.
Yeah, exactly.
I thought you were going to say that everybody prefers a cockapoo, and they sort of
No, it's
love
because,
it.
no, seriously, they say that the cockapoo is one of these dogs that is apparently can identify when things are sort of getting...
I tell you, don't half-hear some rubbish.
Because Stephen and Anne had a little beagle on their show earlier on today.
Right, I saw it. I had a little stroke of it.
Yeah.
Nothing nicer than stroking a beagle out there.
Well, this was it. Everybody was, all cooing over the dog. I thought that was it.
That's right. So you agreed with me. That was it. All of a sudden, not interested. You just want to...
You just want to stroke the cockapoo?
It's getting worse. I can't believe you did that story. Have you got any more there, Philip?
No, I'm not.
No, we're moving on from that. All right, so that's it. He might be back on. He might be back on in a few weeks' time. He might not after that story.
I can't stop talking about Carry On films and then Kerry talking about stroking a cockapoo. And I just can't.
Anyway, moving on.
Can I go home now?
Yeah. Hastily.
Never to come back.
Rishi Sunak gave his first speech as Prime Minister in which he pledged to fix mistakes made under the leadership of Liz Truss and insisted he would rebuild confidence and lead the country through the turbulent times ahead.
But what exactly makes a good speech? And indeed, what makes a good public speaker? Well, join us now to discuss the tips and tricks of oratory. I obviously need them.
You did a cockapoo there.
I obviously need them. After that is public speaking coach Anna Randall. Anna, thank you very much indeed for joining us. So, come on, let's hear it. What makes a good political speaker?
OK, so a great political speaker is someone who is able to convey their ideas with confidence and clarity and passion, and someone who's really taken time to think about the audience. So it's not about what do I want to say, it's about what do I want the audience to hear. And so in order to get to that step, you've got to step back a little bit and think, OK, what do I want them to do? Every speech and presentation is there for a reason. It's there to make something happen. You want someone to do something, to buy your product, to buy into your ideas, or in political terms, to go and vote for you. So it's really important that that's the sort of driving force for any speech that Rishi or any politician ever has to give.
Well, we've had an array of prime ministers in the last couple of years, haven't we? We've had, obviously, David Cameron, Theresa May, Liz Truss, Boris, and now Rishi. Out of that collection of prime ministers, who do you think was the best and why?
It's really interesting, isn't it? Because people really warmed to Boris. And yet he also came under fire quite often for his speeches that often seemed a little bit ad hoc. He sometimes didn't seem very clear himself on what he was trying to say. I know Liz Truss also received a lot of criticism, and indeed Rishi last week on giving his first speech outside Number 10, he came under fire for being quite robotic. And it's not my style to criticise people. I'm more about building people up, because I know that Rishi, for instance, is a really experienced public speaker, but I would be working with him on a sort of dual approach. So it's about the content of the speech and what he's saying and the delivery of that speech, because so if I was working with Rishi, I think he very clearly knows that every speech he's going to give from now until the general election, the action that he wants to come out of it is that he wants the electorate to go and vote for his party. So every speech he gives is going to be driving his party towards what he hopes will be a successful outcome at general election. And he's very aware that he's got to regain the trust of the electorate. And regaining trust is a lot harder than gaining trust. When you've got to rebuild something, you're not starting from zero. You've got a lot of work to do to get back to zero. So I would be working with him on the delivery, so helping people to see that he is genuine, he's authentic, and I think perhaps on Thursday he was a little bit thrown perhaps by nerves, which we all are. I mean, when you see the number of photographers and journalists at Downing Street that day, you can see that it would be pretty unnerving. But what happens to us then is that we lose the colour in our voice that makes it interesting and human and authentic. And I'd also be looking at the content of his speech. So he's really got to connect with us. He's got to show us that he really cares about us so that we can trust him. We can trust that he's got our best interests at heart, that the things we worry about are the same things he worries about. And that's a tough gig for him, because when he says to us as an electorate...
Anna? Yeah, I was going to say, thank you very much indeed. And we've got to do that. We've got to get authenticity. We've got to get trust. It is the content. And obviously, it's always thinking of your audience. Thank you very much indeed for those top tips this morning. Phil and I will definitely be listening back to a tape recording of that, won't we? We'll be watching that, yeah.
Absolutely.
But coming up after the break, we'll be joined by activist Peter Tatchell to discuss his one-man protest in Qatar.
Every morning from 6 o'clock, we'll wake you up with GB News Breakfast with all the stories you didn't know from the night before.
So whether it's serious news, entertainment, or your own views from all over our great nation, we're here to kick off your day with a smile.
The national media should be reflecting and reporting what's happening here. You will notice the northwestern accents.
Whether you're with us on TV, radio, or online, every morning, it's breakfast from 6 a.m. Hope you can join us.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
Hello, I'm Simon Evans. Join me on GB News for Headliners at 11 p.m, where I'll be joined by two of the country's top comedians as we take a look at tomorrow's newspapers tonight. If it's a big story, we'll be covering it, I guarantee, but we'll also have some fun along the way. That's GB News Headliners at 11 p.m. We won't put you to sleep, unlike some of the other paper review shows out there. So join us, 11 p.m, 7 nights a week.
Hello there, it's Eamon Holmes here from Breakfast on GB News. We're not just on your television and your screens, you know.
We're on DAB plus digital radio, so you can listen to your favourite shows on the move.
If you've not yet listened to GB News Radio, it's very simple. We're on your radio player and TuneIn apps, on your smart speaker, phone or tablet, or online at gbnews.uk.
Take us with you wherever you go. GB News Radio.
You never have to miss a moment of the People's Channel.
Join me, Arlene Foster, for the briefing on GB News. Every Friday at 3 p.m, I'll give you all the latest political news and analysis, and we'll have robust live debate. To make sure that you're caught up on all of the biggest issues of the day, we'll bring on experts in their field. I'll ask the questions that you'd like to ask. We're not afraid to tackle discussions from all perspectives, including yours. Don't forget, the briefing with me, Arlene Foster, every Friday at 3 p.m. on GB News.
Hello, I'm Alastair Stewart, and I'd invite you to join me at noon on Saturdays and Sundays for Alastair Stewart and Friends. I've been in this business for over 40 years. Now, here at GB News, I've never been happier. I get to choose the big stories that really interest me. We hear what you have to say, and you hear what I have to say. I really hope you can join me, noon on Saturdays and Sundays.
Welcome back. LGBT activist Peter Tatchell launched a protest earlier this week in Qatar. The Middle Eastern nation has been accused of a myriad of human rights abuses, including the punishment of LGBT people and the exploitation of migrant workers.
It comes less than a month before the start of the FIFA World Cup, which is expected to attract 1.2 million visitors from around the world, which Qatar will be hosting in its capital city of Doha.
Well, we're delighted to say that Peter Tatchell joins us now. Peter, thank you for your time. You were doing your protest about the laws in Qatar. I guess some people might say, look, we might disagree with the laws in other countries, but we should be respectful of them. And just as we wouldn't want them to come and tell us that we should introduce their laws in the UK. Why should we go around telling them what laws they should have in their country?
Well, to me, it's very simple. Qatar is a member of the United Nations. All United Nations members are supposed to abide by the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, and that states very clearly that every person on this planet is entitled to equal treatment and protection against discrimination. Qatar defies that, both with regard to LGBT plus people, but also for women and for migrant workers. You know, although my protest was primarily about LGBT plus rights, I feel very strongly at the degrading way in which Qatari women are treated. And many women in Qatar also feel the same way. They want international voices to speak out. You know, in Qatar, a woman has to get permission from a male guardian in order to marry, in order to get certain government jobs, and in order to study abroad and travel. I mean, it's an abrogation of the autonomy and individuality of female people. And I just think that's totally wrong. I think we need to take a stand and say that human rights are universal for everyone.
Peter, I want to understand the planning that went into this for you to even get there on that spot and do this protest, and sort of what happened. How did the police approach you? Could they speak English? I mean, you know, were you scared? Will you fill in some of that story for us?
But I've got to tell you, I was terrified. I was shaking. I had a tension headache. My stomach was churning over. At times I was shaking so much I could hardly hold my placard, because I knew very clearly that Qatar is an extremely repressive state, and people who try to protest get arrested, sometimes beaten, and nearly always jailed. So I was aware that that could happen to me, but I felt that something had to be done so that Qatar does not have this huge PR victory of holding the World Cup without voices of dissent and criticism. And in
But how did you get into the country? I heard you were, you know, you were concerned that they might have checked your sort of social media. How did you sort of get there, and how did you get in front of the building and make the protest?
Well, it's a very complicated story. Qatar has some of the world's most sophisticated surveillance technology. Every citizen can be tracked. So, for example, for a visitor to enter Qatar, you have to have a COVID app called Esther, but it's also secret spyware. It can get full access to your mobile phone, read your text, emails, social media, listen to voice messages, everything. So as a well-known critic of Qatar's human rights record, I had to invent a false story. And the false story was that I was going back to Australia to deal with my mother's affairs. She died, sadly, a couple of months ago, and I was going there to deal with her property and possessions and clear them up. And what I did, I booked another flight on the 20th of November, the opening day of the World Cup. And of course, the Qataris, I think, believed that I genuinely was going to Australia to deal with my mother's affairs, but that I was coming back on the 20th of November, the opening day of the World Cup, to do the protest. So that's why I think they let me in. And when I got to immigration, they questioned me a bit, and I had all tourist brochures. I asked them about where's the tourist information office? Will the National, I didn't mention the National Museum, but I said, will the Islamic Arts Museum be open, and so on. And they fell for it. They fell for it.
Peter,
so what happened, like, I went to the National Museum, a big prestigious building, stood on one of the major roads there, and unfurled a placard, which you saw on the screen, Qatar arrests, jails, and subjects LGBT plus people to conversion, a reference to the secret gay conversion centres where LGBT plus people can be detained against their will and subjected to horrible, degrading, vile treatments in a bid to turn them straight.
Peter, the Qataris say that you were just moved on, you weren't arrested. Is that the case? Were you not detained or arrested?
Qatar is trying to minimise the PR damage caused by this protest. So like every dictatorship, they will try and discredit any protester. I can assure you I was held against my will for 49 minutes by a combination of Qatari police and state security officials. They interrogated me relentlessly. They discovered that my colleague, Simon Harris, who travelled completely independently from me, I had no verbal or mobile phone contact with him at all to keep us completely separate because of the surveillance. They discovered him far away filming and photographing the protest. And they went up to him, they grabbed his mobile phone, they deleted all the photos and all the images, all the videos. But fortunately, he'd managed to upload some of them and send them to London before the police could do that. You're right that the police were mainly speaking Arabic, but one of the officers could speak little bits of English and French, which I sort of can, schoolboy French I can do. And plus, he did some of the messages on Google Translate. And one of the messages was, this is an illegal protest. You can be in very, very serious trouble. There are very severe penalties. That's what his Google Translate message said.
And I know you've got to go to another interview. I know you've got to leave us, but did you think this protest has been successful? Is this the start of something? What do you want the end point to be? Because the World Cup is pretty soon.
The aim of the protest was not the protest itself. It was to use the protest to get international media attention in order to raise public consciousness and to put pressure on public officials, like Prince William, who, to his great credit, has agreed not to go to the World Cup. So I think it's opened up a conversation, which I hope others will continue. And people in Qatar who asked me to do this protest, they say they hope others will follow what I've done to keep the pressure on the regime. It is a dictatorship. It's a police state. We shouldn't be going there. We shouldn't be giving it credibility and kudos.
Peter Tatchell, thank you very much for finding the time to speak to us this morning. We appreciate it.
Thank you very much.
And I'll be very interested to hear what people think about Peter's protest. Do they agree that with his protest, or do they think that we should be respectful of the laws of other countries and let them pass the laws that they want to? And I think people might have different opinions. I've got to say, Peter's a very, very brave guy. He does protests all around the world on different things and puts himself in harm's way. And whether you agree with his protests or not, he's a very, very brave campaigner. I've got to say
that's why I wanted to know how much planning and preparation had gone into it. It wasn't just that he turned up, he explained there what he'd done. But look, we've got more of your views coming in. I've got, we were talking about poppies before and how Tom Jones, the councillor, had been absolutely lambasted for wearing a poppy in the end of October. Anyway, Peter says, if, as Philip says, that you shouldn't wear a poppy until the 1st of November, then why does the British Legion launch the poppy appeal in October? Genuinely would love to know.
I think that's a very good point, Peter. I think maybe I'm in the wrong on this. It won't be the first time and won't be the last either. Parker says, I'm told the time to start wearing a poppy is the last Friday in October, and it's the only charity that you can be sure will use your donation properly.
Pete says, first things first, wearing a poppy is like, when do you put the lights of your car on? If you think you need lights, then you need lights. Likewise, if you need a poppy, then get on your poppy. Also, poppies are on display well before the 1st of November and therefore can be worn. Thank goodness for our viewers. They've got all the answers here.
Yeah, Christine says, as a Forces veteran, I wear mine all year round. I'm extremely proud of all servicemen and women and veterans. Also, I like to show my respect to the men and women who gave their lives for us.
I love Kirk says here, there are too many people nowadays trying to tell you what to do and what you should be doing, airing their unwanted opinions. Wear your poppy whenever you want, all year round, if that suits you. Fantastic, eh?
Yeah, and Paul says, I think it's fine to wear a poppy from mid-October when they're on sale. Ignore the lefties and Britain haters. Wear your poppy with prominence and pride. Like I say, thank goodness for our viewers.
Keep those views coming in. You know where to send them to. But coming up, we'll be talking about a new report looking into the origins of COVID-19. But first, it's time for your news headlines with Alice.
It's 11:32. I'm Alice Porter in the GB newsroom. A whistleblower at an asylum processing centre in Kent has told GB News the government is not acknowledging the true extent of the crisis there. The worker at the Manston military base claims violence, disease and attempts of self-harm are a daily occurrence at the facility. The processing centre is only supposed to hold asylum seekers for no more than 24 hours before transferring them to longer-term accommodation. But many have allegedly been there weeks in unsuitable living conditions. The head of the Royal Navy has ordered an investigation into what he's called abhorrent allegations of sexual assault and harassment in the submarine service. Admiral Sir Ben Key says the behaviour will not be tolerated and is not a true reflection of what service life should be. He says anyone who is found culpable will be held accountable regardless of their rank or status. The Foreign Secretary, James Cleverly, says countries need to work together to starve terrorists of money and technology. Addressing a United Nations meeting in India, he urged allies to put more pressure on big companies to prevent terror groups from using their tech to recruit and radicalise people. Rail passengers in Scotland are being warned to expect widespread disruption, with RMT union members staging a 24-hour strike over pay. ScotRail says the latest offer gives the lowest paid staff a basic increase of almost 7.5%, but the union is calling for a rise that's more in line with inflation. TV, online and DAB plus radio, this is GB News. Now it's back to Esther and Philip.
Thank you, Alice. The COVID-19 pandemic was more likely than not the result of a laboratory accident, according to a US Senate committee.
Speculation has been rife that the virus was the result of a lab leak from the Wuhan Institute of Virology in China, which had been collecting bat viruses. But many scientists disputed the theory, claiming a natural spillover was more likely. But the new report said that there were anomalies in the emergence of COVID-19.
Joining us now is the biologist and author Matt Ridley. Matt, thank you very much for joining us. This has been quite a lengthy story because, of course, right at the start of COVID, people were speculating that it had been a leak from a lab, and I think it was 27 leading scientists wrote a letter to the Lancet magazine saying that was preposterous and ludicrous, and yet now it's becoming a widespread acceptance. What's happened in the intervening period?
Well, it turned out that those 27 scientists, most of them had links to the Wuhan lab, which they hadn't declared. That became something of a scandal in itself. But gradually, over the intervening months, more and more evidence has emerged of the work that was being done in the lab in Wuhan, and less evidence has emerged linking that wet market with the potential first cases in terms of an infected animal therein. What this new Senate report does is it analyses in huge detail the documents that were floating around in that lab in the autumn of 2019 and compares them with other time periods and finds that they had a major crisis in the lab in November 2019, a crisis that seems to have gone all the way up to Xi Jinping himself. Who sent messages saying, please sort yourselves out. The lab safety record is not good. You need to do something about it. At the same time as they were under pressure to produce more results from their virology research. So the squeeze between the demand to produce more results in their new labs and the worry about lab safety incidents in those labs seems to have reached a peak in November 2019. And you can only find this out if you know how to read these rather cryptic reports that they were sending each other at the time and which were buried on the internet and have been disinterred by this Senate report.
Matt, can you explain, because people will think, oh, well, what does a leak entail? What are the ways that a virus can break out? What was it then? I don't know, the security, the measures are in place that should keep those viruses within a lab, because there could be future ones.
Yeah, well, it could be that somebody went collecting viruses in the wild and got infected himself by a bat directly. It could be that they brought it to the lab, did experiments on it, and new evidence came out just a week ago that there is a pattern in the genome of the virus that looks exactly what you'd expect if it had been stitched together from experiments. Most of the virus very closely resembles a known bat virus that they were studying in the lab in 2018, but a small section of it doesn't look like that. So it looks like they might have stitched it together. Now, if they did that, and if they infected human cells with it, which was their normal practice, and they infected humanized mice, which again they were doing, and they did this at biosafety level 2 or 3, then the chances of one of the researchers catching COVID from these cells or these animals would have been very high indeed. And so, then you've got an infected person, maybe he doesn't have a very severe case, goes to the market, gives it to other people, and we're off to the races, as it were. There's a very interesting other thing in this report, which is that they've found that the preparation of a vaccine by that lab must have started very early. It cannot really have started in January because the animal experiments they describe take a long time to do. It looks more likely, 2 of the 3 experts they consulted say, that it started in November. In other words, they already knew they had a problem with COVID in November, 2 months before the rest of the world knew. And the man who did those animal experiments with a potential vaccine, he was dead by the time the paper was published, perhaps from COVID. Who knows? If only they would do what a decent Western society would do and come forward and give us the full details of what they were up to in the lab, then they could either exonerate themselves or we could know what happened.
And if it becomes accepted and agreed across the international community that this was a leak from a lab, Matt, I just wondered what should the consequences be for China from that?
Well, one of the consequences is we should take much more care about doing these kind of experiments, not just in China, but elsewhere. There's a rush of experiments. There's another one emerged just in the last day or two that Imperial College was stitching together different varieties of different variants of the virus and testing how dangerous they were. These kind of gain-of-function research of concern experiments, GOFROC they're called, have been going on with very little supervision or caution all over the world. And we really need to do something about this and make sure that there is an international agreement to be much more careful when doing these experiments on viruses. I'm someone who's in favor of biotechnology. I'm a huge fan of it and what it can achieve for medicine and for agriculture and other things, but not playing with deadly viruses in this way.
Matt Ridley, I want to thank you very much for coming on today because you were one of those very few brave souls who was looking into where COVID-19 came from. You wrote your book back, I think it was 2021, Viral, Where Did It Come From? One of the few people who were speaking out. So thank you very much for that. And obviously some vindication today to see this report from the Senate. So thank you for joining us.
And I've got to say that the World Health Organization doesn't come out of it with a great deal of credit because they didn't really do much to expose the facts from this. And as I mentioned earlier, the 27 scientists, people always said, let's listen to the scientists, let's trust the scientists. And we actually found out that those scientists perhaps had a vested interest in saying what they did, and it's now been
And remember,
discredited.
we went and met Sir Richard Dearlove, who was giving a speech about this, and he too felt that it had been a leak from a lab, and he was saying to us the difficulties he was going through trying to expose this. So two very
he's a
brave people.
former head of MI6.
Yeah. But coming up, we'll be looking at a march taking place today with parents demanding government reform on childcare and parental leave. So don't go anywhere.
Weekday afternoons on GB News, we've got the whole of the UK covered. From 12 to 3, it's GB News Day with me, Mark Longhurst.
And me, Gloria Di Piero. You'll get the very latest on everything that's been going on across our great nation.
And from 3 till 6, watch out for GB News Live with me, Patrick Christys. I'm not here to mess around with all the biggest topics and guests. You will always be up to date. GB News Day and GB News Live from 12 p.m.
Only on GB News.
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hi there, it's Stephen and Anne.
At breakfast from 6 a.m, you'll always be caught up with everything you need to know, the latest headlines, opinions and debates.
We'll bring you the good news and the bad, but most of all, we're here for you.
Remember, send in your views and let us know what you would like us to talk about.
That's because we're your news channel. And every morning at 6 a.m, it's breakfast on GB News.
Join me, Nana Akua, on Friday, Saturday and Sunday afternoons on GB News. Expect fiery debate and passionate discussion as me and my panel tackle some of the biggest topics hitting the headlines. It's a place for everyone's opinion. No one gets cancelled, but no one gets an easy ride.
Oh, she's on it today.
Be ready for conversations that are fierce, frank, and of course, fun every Friday, Saturday and Sunday afternoon from 4 p.m. on GB News.
On Mark Dolan tonight, we have a simple plan, which is to inform, stimulate and entertain in equal measure. It's all about getting your opinions on the national television airwaves. I love my viewer emails, mark@gbnews.uk. So do join me from 9 p.m. to midnight every Friday, Saturday and Sunday for big guests, big opinions and a big presenter. 6'5", don't you know? See you then on GB News.
Welcome back. It's nearly 11:44. Now, March of the Mummies is a national protest taking place today with more than 12,000 parents marching in 11 locations across the country, demanding government reform on childcare, parental leave and flexible working.
Joining us now from the Westminster protest is GB News reporter Theo Chikomba.
So, Theo, what's going on there?
Good morning. Yes, good morning. We are in central London where thousands are marching, advocating for better childcare, investment in childcare and more things for mothers and some who are just here to support them, their family members as well. And this morning we are kindly joined by Beth and Darcy, who are here on the march as well. Beth, thank you so much for joining us. So just tell me why you're here and why this is important to you.
Well, I am a new mother. This is my daughter. She's just coming up to a year old. I'm about to return to work at the end of my maternity leave, and I'm single, so I have one income. And unfortunately, when I go back to work, I basically will be giving my entire salary over to my childcare costs. So essentially, it's not worth me going back to work, but I want to go back to work and I want to be part of the workforce and I love my job and I don't want to take a career break, but unfortunately, I will have peanuts to survive on, which is really difficult when you want to spend time with your daughter, do fun things, and there's just not enough money. I mean, barely enough money to eat at the moment, so it's hard. And I have a lovely job. The job is not the problem, the childcare costs are the problem.
And in your experience with work, would you say the response when you told them you were having a child was a positive one, giving you flexibility at all?
Not flexibility as such, but I do work for a wonderful company, a small company, but because it's a small company, there's just no more money for an increase in salary. And obviously things are just, a bit stretched at the moment. So I'm just in that situation where, it's going to be tough for me, but they were absolutely lovely. Yeah, my company were lovely. So again, it's not about my company, it's about the cost, the external costs of bringing up a child. That's where the problem is. It's not with, my personal situation.
And the wider picture, there's so many people here. Yeah. What message are you trying to send today and what do you hope will come out of this today?
Well, just to take us seriously, really. I think we're here, we're filled with love, we're all marching together. It's pregnant women, it's mums, it's dads, it's families. It's really beautiful. And I think I just want people to sort of take the future seriously because that's what it is. It's investing in all these lovely people so that we can make, it's long-term thinking and it's difficult at the moment and I understand that. There's not a lot of money to go around. But actually, if you put money into now and invest in the future, it's going to make a massive difference. It's our future workforce, and I'm part of that. I hope to be part of that, and she hopefully too.
Beth and Darcy, thank you so much for your time this morning. As you heard from Beth there, this is important to her as she wants to work as well, and to be able to support her family during this time of cost of living. We spoke to the founder, Jolie, this morning, and she's speaking about how there's a new government in now. They should take this seriously, and hence why they are outside Downing Street now, just to make that message clear so that they can be heard today.
Theo, thank you very much indeed for joining us from that march.
March of the Mummies. But I do think, and I bet you our viewers have got different views on this, is it really the government that needs to get involved here? Or is it between the individual and the business to make sure that, you know, that they can work the hours they need to, they've got the support they want? And is it down to, obviously, the individual making sure that you have done planning so you know the cost and you know what you've got to do, and can you, you know, have a break? I just wonder where that balance comes from.
Interesting debate.
Yeah, I think we're going to have that debate next week, because I think it is, because government can't do everything. But one thing I do agree with, child cost cares is too expensive. So I think there's maybe too much regulation in there, but the rest is that for government or the individual.
We've had lots of comments from people, particularly about the illegal immigration from France. William says most of these are illegal migrants, 90% are men. We have to get out of this European Convention of Human Rights. We have thousands of homeless British citizens, including veterans, who are not being looked after.
Richard says we are an overcrowded, small country. Our social services, NHS, etc., is collapsing. A state of national emergency needs to be enacted. This will give the government the powers they need to act.
And James says Rishi Sunak needs to make an agreement with France allowing illegal immigrants to be returned. They cannot patrol miles and miles of beaches, but immigrants being sent back would reduce the attraction of coming to the UK.
Thank you.
Thank you very much for your views. We do enjoy reading them.
Yeah, and it's time now to go through today's top sport and showbiz stories. We've got the wonderful Aidan McGee here and the lovely Hayley Palmer here, who, you know...
Tanned Hayley Palmer.
Tanned, jet-setting, holiday. I'm ashamed to have you back on the show. All you seem to do is go from one holiday to the next.
But I was going to stay there, but I came back, especially for you two, and to see how bad Aidan's jokes was. So, you know,
they haven't improved while
they
you've been
haven't.
away.
It wasn't.
I don't know. I mean, I'm dressing up as a different type of bread every day next week. Roll on Monday.
See what I mean? Was it worth coming back for that?
It wasn't.
I think not.
No.
But yeah,
to show off your tan.
Anyway, the big news I saw was about the death of Jerry Lee Lewis.
he was the kind of the last rock star of that generation of, you know, your Elvises and Chuck Berrys, and, you know, he was really famous for standing up, playing the piano. I saw actually that Elton John tweeted, without Jerry Lee Lewis, I wouldn't have become who I am today. He was groundbreaking and exciting, a brilliant singer too, and it's a really sad loss. He was 87 and he died in his home.
He was
in Memphis.
It was very controversial, though, wasn't it? Because, I mean, he was obviously brilliant on the piano and everything, great balls of fire, terrific stuff. But his private life was very controversial. I was reading in The Guardian, it said that Judith...
Most people might be more shocked about Philip reading The Guardian rather than what he's about to say about Jerry Lee Lewis's love life.
Broadening my horizons, you know. But it said there, Judith, his seventh wife, was by his side when he passed away. And, of course, it was his 1958 tour to the UK that it emerged he'd married his 13-year-old cousin.
Yeah, a bit weird.
Yeah, that is
from which his career didn't really recover, unsurprisingly.
But he also had 6 children, and apparently 2 of them had passed away as well, which I didn't know about.
He had very young, I think. I think one was wasn't he, about 2 or 3 when they.
Yeah, but I mean, he won a Lifetime Achievement, a Grammy.
And he sort of had a bit of a comeback. I think it was like 2010, and he did sort of an album with lots of other sort of famous singers on as well. But you're quite right, that ruined his career. Something that was permitted,
really.
something that was permitted. Yeah, but something that was permitted in America. And what he'd done, but he came to here, and obviously our belief system completely different, and that destroyed his career.
Absolutely, yeah.
Aidan, sporty world. I'm making a plug here for the Rugby League World Cup, some proper northern sport. I know you soft Southerners don't really follow it, but
there are 18 venues. 1 or 2 are in London as well, including the Emirates. But yeah, I was looking at the numbers of this actually. It quite surprised me. 1.8 million people tuned in for the Samoa game. Of course, England are playing this afternoon against Greece.
That should be a tough one.
So that's what we said earlier on. I know, look, the competition doesn't look great, but that hasn't stopped it attracting the numbers. 1.8 million people tuned in for the Wales and the Scotland games as well. Now, we've seen with rugby union this week that the international game in rugby union is very, very strong. So the club teams are struggling. We've seen Wasps almost going out of business, been relegated yesterday, deducted points, whatever. The rugby league has the opposite problem. In the northwest of England and in Yorkshire, the club sides are very, very strong. Warrington, Leeds, Widnes, everybody else. Now, it's a real test this time for the Rugby League World Cup, because it's the international teams. And it's going pretty well. They're holding up all right. The BBC is showing every minute of every game, and I think England have got a really good chance of winning it as well.
No, I can't see past Australia myself.
You can't. Well, yeah, I know. They're always the big challenge, aren't they?
I wanted to do a little bit of a sort of a showbiz sports story because we've got Tyson Fury.
Oh, yeah.
Releasing a single, Tyson Fury.
That's right. Yeah, he's got a little bit of a penchant for singing as well. Because remember when he beat Vladimir Klitschko back in 2015, he sang Miss American Pie afterwards. He serenaded his wife in the ring, and that was a very unexpected victory. Now he's recording another song this time, which is Sweet Caroline, because that was the anthem during England's World Cup, Euro 2021, which happened 18 months ago. We've got the World Cup just a few weeks away. He's recording it again, this time for a mental health charity. Now, what's interesting is that when he fought against Deontay Wilder 2 years ago, the first one, he dominated the fight and was floored by that Alabama slammer, and he was down and he was out. And he said, I had to get up for every mental health sufferer in the world who's ever been afflicted by this, and that helped him get up and fight. And he's recording a song, and he's going to donate the proceeds to that charity.
Can he sing?
Yeah, he's a good singer.
His wife said he's not that. He enjoys singing, but he's not.
I think he's all right.
But I just thought nobody in the recording studio is going to tell him he hasn't got a good voice.
No, probably not.
Nobody's going to say that.
How long can you go with that song?
Well, I think
I could sing that.
Ask Esther. She could.
No, I've heard Esther singing.
I did Rick Astley.
I probably could, but I think as everybody sing, no, probably could ruin the song.
Yeah.
Not probably could sing.
Can you, Esther? Can you sing? Can you actually sing?
No.
No.
Well, I can. I can hold a tune. I can hold a tune. Yeah. Anyway, moving swiftly on.
Now, talking about singers, Adele, who you think she's got everything, she's not satisfied.
She wants to head back to uni after Vegas because she wants to study a BA in English literature. And apparently she's always wanted to be an English literature teacher.
Oh, right.
So, actually, why not? Just because you are super famous doesn't mean that you can't go back and get a degree, go and get a qualification. Why not? It feels like...
Do it online.
You do it online. But I've interviewed people off shows and they've been like, oh, we can't go and do a normal job. And I think there is a lot of...
But equally, English literature would be a wonderful degree for her because actually, if you look at her and listen to her lyrics, I think she is good with the English language, and I can see her wanting to absorb and books and literature, and she's just doing her life the other way around. But wouldn't it be great if she became your teacher?
Oh,
or just in
your
class.
Can I have a picture? Can I have a selfie? Can I have and maybe you'd love the subject even more because you've got such an inspirational teacher, and it's all about the teacher, isn't it?
It's all about the teacher. So let's watch this space. I mean, will it happen? I don't actually know. If I was Adele, probably not. But you never know.
Still licking your wounds after QPR got beat?
Yeah, I was in Birmingham late last night. Yeah, listen, we dominated possession. We just weren't sharp enough in each box, but there's a long, long way to go yet.
But you saw Jasper Carrot?
No, I didn't see him. No, I was in the Jasper Carrot suite. Yeah, it reminds me of one of his best jokes. He said, I hear Glenn Hoddle's found God. It must have been one hell of a pass.
Jasper Carrot's jokes are nearly as bad as Aidan.
Time for Hayley, thank you very much. Aidan, thank you very much. That's all from us today. We'll be back next week. Don't go anywhere because next, standing in for Alistair Stewart is the wonderful Angela Rippon.
Good morning, I'm Stephen Keats with your latest Met Office forecast. And through today, we're going to see an area of rain pushing its way north across parts of the UK. Either side of it, there will be some brighter skies, and whether it's cloudy and damp or sunny, it will be feeling pretty warm for the time of year. And that's because we've got the winds coming up from the south around this area of low pressure out in the Atlantic, but they'll also be dragging up a series of frontal systems which will be bringing those areas of cloud and rain. So first thing this morning, it's going to be pretty damp across parts of Wales, northern England. This rain slowly shuffling its way a bit further north into southern Scotland, eventually into central Scotland later in the day. Meanwhile, further south, for the eastern side of England, it will be brightening up into Saturday afternoon. Just the odd shower, but some warm sunshine coming through, but a hangback of cloud hanging on across parts of Wales and southwest England with a few further showers. In that sunshine, though, temperatures above 20 Celsius, peaking perhaps 22 or 23 in the London area, really quite exceptional for the time of year. Now, the rain through this evening will be pushing its way further north across parts of Scotland. So after a dry day, it will be turning damp here through the later evening into the overnight period. Elsewhere, though, there'll be clearance in the cloud. There'll be some clear spells to take us through into Sunday morning. But for the far southeast, the cold front just pepping up a little bit, some splashes of rain returning back here, and one or two showers coming into the west. But again, wherever you are, it will be another very mild night to take us into Sunday morning. So for Sunday, the far southeast and East Anglia prone to seeing further areas of cloud and some bits and pieces of rain. Some uncertainties of how far west this rain extends. Elsewhere, though, across the UK, it will be, broadly speaking, a picture of sunshine and showers. Some of these showers quite heavy, potentially with the risk of some hail and thunder from northern and western areas, and quite breezy and blustery in the west as well. Elsewhere, though, some sunshine coming through. Not quite as warm as it was as it will be on Saturday, but still temperatures very respectable for the time of year. Bit of uncertainty then as we move from Sunday into Monday. The devil in the detail for the Halloween forecast, it has to be said. Staying quite unsettled into next week, and temperatures slowly coming back down closer to the seasonal norm. Take care.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday, and there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch. You've been cancelled. Join the club. Oh my goodness me. And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilised conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
We are GB News.
And we'd like to say thank you
To each and every one of you.
for helping our great nation
Find its voice.
We're absolutely everywhere.
across England, Scotland,
Wales and Northern Ireland.
On TV,
On radio,
and online. We're proud to be the People's Channel, Britain's
News channel.
On the Mark Stein Show, we cover the stories a lot of people are scared even to mention. The stuff that really matters with some of the world's biggest thinkers.
Now is his opportunity to kind of take the steering wheel of history.
Break away from the flop at 8 o'clock on GB News with the Mark Stein.